that were having an argument over whales. And the teacher insisted that it was physically impossible to swallow a human being. The throat was simply too small. And the little girl said, remembering her Sunday school training, that Jonah was swallowed by a whale. Well, the teacher insisted, no, it was simply impossible for a whale to swallow a human being. Could not happen. And the girl just looked at the teacher and says, well, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask Jonah myself. Well, by then the teacher had lost her patience, and she just said, well, what happens if Jonah goes to hell? And without skipping a beat, the little girl said, then you ask him. Today we conclude our sermon series on traveling. And it's a very difficult passage. It's one that very few will preach on, which is going to become very obvious here in a second. For those of you who need to be caught up with our lessons here, throughout the summer we've been talking about journey because of where we live. No matter where we go, whether it's to Lake Minnetonka or shopping to Cheyenne or Fort Collins or to vacation, we have to hop in the car. We have to go somewhere, and usually someone says, are we there yet? But also this summer, we've been lifting up the First Testament prophets. And we've been learning some great lessons. We have met Elijah, who battled a queen who wanted him dead after he defeated 450 of her followers. He passes that test, lives to be an old man, and we soon learn that he is ushered up into heaven into a fiery chariot. As he is going up, he literally drops his mantle, and Elisha, his successor, picks up that mantle and then continues to carry on the journey of letting Israel know their special relationship with God. And then last week we talked about the prophet Amos, who said that we have to live up to a different standard, a God-like standard. Today, one more prophet, one more challenge for the nation of Israel. And this one is unique. You see, in each of the prophets that we've been learning in this sermon series, they have their own personalities, which makes sense. I mean, every pastor has their own strengths and little interesting quirks. I have very minor quirks. You don't have to worry about my quirks, but we all have them. Elijah has his insecurities. Elisha doesn't like people picking on him. Amos is who we might call a very reluctant prophet. And Hosea, wow. Hosea's got his issues. And he challenges Israel in a very unique way. Vicky's going to come up here and share with her a very controversial passage, and one that gets interpreted in some different ways because of the names that are listed here. So listen carefully to how she reads in her version, which is New International Version, the same things that is listed on the screen that comes from New Revised Standard Version. Because it is a highly controversial passage, and one that can be interpreted in a couple different ways. Vicki?
Okay. It's Hosea, first chapter, verses 2 through 10. Hosea's wife and children. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, "Go marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her. For like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord." So he married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to Hosea, "Call him Jezreel, because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. In that day I will break Israel's bow in the valley of Jezreel." Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. Then the Lord said to Hosea, "Call her Lo-Ruhamah, which means not loved. For I will no longer show love to Israel, that I should at all forgive them. Yet I will show love to Judah, and I will save them, not by bow, sword, or battle, or by horses and horsemen, but I, the Lord their God, will save them. After she had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, Gomer had another son. Then the Lord said, "Call him Lo-Ami," which means "not my people," for you are not my people, and I am not your God. Yet the Israelites will be like the sand on the seashore, which cannot be measured or counted. In the place where it was said to them, "You are not my people," they will be called children of the living God. May God add his blessing to this reading of his word.
Thank you. You know, it's at this point in the sermon that I want to say amen, send you home, and let you come up with your own interpretation. I mean, how do you preach on this passage? Hosea, father who does not know best. Hosea, how not to win Father of the Year award. Or how to ruin your child's self-image by just giving them a bad name. This is uncomfortable stuff. We squirm. I know it's easier to gloss over this passage, make excuses, say, well, that was then, but we're New Testament people. But you know what? We can't do that. Hosea is a revered prophet. It is in our Bible. We must address this passage and why it is still read to this day. So let's address it first. Well, the New Revised Standard Version actually refers to Gomer as a woman of whoredom. I actually prefer the passage that Vicky read, that translation that actually refers to Gomer as a woman of promiscuity, which means that she is not a prostitute, which some people actually interpret. She is just having trouble being faithful to her spouse. In fact, I believe that is why God says, Hosea, you need to go out and marry a woman of this character. Because Israel is like a wife of promiscuity, lacking in faithfulness. We still squirm. Maybe we understand it just a little bit better. Because we have all been unfaithful to God. We like to sleep in and think to ourselves, well, we don't have to go to church today. Or we look at our wealth and say, it's all mine, I've earned all this wealth, instead of realize everything comes from God. I know that each one of us has walked past someone who is needy and not responded. I'm as guilty of that as well. We've talked about another behind their back. We have made judgments against God's people instead of realizing that they are of sacred worth. We are sinners. What's that phrase? The church is a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints. I mean, we go to the doctor because we're sick, we're ill. We don't sit in the hospital because we're healthy. Likewise, we go to church to make us uncomfortable because we are sinful people. Are we there yet? Not only does this sermon series remind us of traveling, but also that we are a work in progress. We haven't quite arrived yet at what John Wesley would call perfection. Are we there yet? No, but we're making progress. Sam and Edith were 85 years old. They were married for some 60 years. Though they were far from rich, they managed to get by because they watched their pennies. Though they were not young, both of them were in good health, largely due to his wife's insistence on healthy foods and exercise in the last decade of their life. One day their good health didn't help them as they went on a rare vacation and their plane crashed and both were sent to heaven at the same time. They reached the pearly gates and there an escort waited to show them inside. He took them to a beautiful mansion, furnished in gold and fine silks with a fully stocked kitchen and furnished in the master bath in their favorite clothes hanging in the closet. They gasped in astonishment when he said, "Welcome to heaven. This is your home now." Sam asked how much this is all going to cost. "Why, nothing," their companion replied. "Remember, this is your reward in heaven." Sam looked out at the window, and right there he saw a championship golf course, far more beautiful than ever had built on earth. "What are the green fees?" grumbled the old man. "This is heaven," the companion replied. "You can play for free every day." Next they went to the clubhouse, and they saw the lavish buffet lunch with every imaginable cuisine laid out before them, from seafood to steaks to exotic desserts, free flowing beverages. "Don't even ask," said his companion. "This is heaven. It is free as long as you want to enjoy them." The old man looked around and glanced nervously to Edith. "Well, where are the low-fat and low-cholesterol foods and the decaffeinated tea?" "That's the best part," the companion replied. "You can eat and drink as much as you want and like it as much as you want. You will not get fat or sick. This is heaven." Sam pushed. "What about the gym to work out at?" "Not unless you want to," was the answer. "No testing my sugar or blood pressure or never again. All you do is enjoy yourself." Sam glared at Edith and said, "You and your crappy bran muffins, we could have been here 15 years ago." We laugh. We joke. But the seriousness of this passage is still before us. When I was 5 years old, we moved from Ceresco to Hebron. As you know, my dad was a pastor. He was getting assigned as a new pastor at Hebron. As we were traveling there, I still remember asking my dad, "What's the name of that town we're going to?" Fast forward a few years, and I remember my kids about the same age. We were going to some town, and they said, "What was the name of that town we're going to?" And it brought me back to that 5-year-old memory of, and I don't know why I could not remember Hebron, Nebraska. Names are important. They're significant. I've got your show and tell items here. My name is rare. I know this because I can't find any name tags or placemats that say Seth. This is one that my mom found for me. It actually has my name on it. In fact, my name is so rare, when I was in kindergarten, I actually changed my name to Scott because there was a song with that title in it. My name, Seth, is in the Bible. Seth is the third child of Adam and Eve. Seth was born to replace Abel after he was killed by Cain. In fact, he's part of the genealogy charts that you read about with Jesus and King David. My full name is Seth Landon Leypoldt. My middle name, Landon, is my mom's maiden name. So I feel very proud to be connected with both names. My last name, Leypoldt, is very rare. My ancestor moved to a little tiny town in southern Germany, and the spelling got changed to Leypoldt. And to this day, every single Leypoldt that we meet throughout the world on the internet can trace the lineage back to that little town in Germany. Seth Leypoldt is a very rare name. I don't think that there's ever been a Seth Leypoldt. I'm very proud of my name now that it is so rare, but I don't think the same could be said about Hosea's children. So let's take a look at each one. Jezreel just means failure in a battle. It would be like if you named your child Bay of Pigs. Seriously. It is a reminder to the leadership of the country of a failed military battle. Lo Ruhama just means no pity. It is a warning. God says, you will lose, and I will not offer you forgiveness. And then finally, the champion of all these great names is Lo Ami, just means total abandonment. God says, Israel, you are not my people anymore. When I mentioned this text to one of the helpers at Vacation Bible School this week, this person said to me, "What was he thinking?" I mean, what's going on here? He marries a prostitute. He names his children in such horrible ways. Hosea, speaking for God, really has the people's attention. Let me tell you a joke. There was a man who walks in a bar. He says, "Bartender, give me 2 shots, one for me and one for my buddy." The bartender says, "Do you want both shots now, or do you want me to wait for your buddy to get in here?" And the guy says, "Oh, my buddy's right here," and pulls out of his pocket this guy who stands 3 inches tall. The bartender says, "Can that guy drink all of that?" And he says, "Sure, watch Rodney." Rodney picks up the drink and takes it on down. The bartender's just amazed. The bartender says, "Can your little friend there, can he walk?" And the guy says, "Yeah, sure." Takes a quarter and says, "Rodney, go get it." And Rodney runs down to the end of the bar, grabs the quarter, and comes back. Bartender is just astonished. And he says, "Can your friend, can he talk?" "Can he talk?" came the response. "Hey, Rodney, would you tell him about that time we were down in Africa having a safari and we were hunting, and you called that witch doctor a jerk?" You keep hearing the rumbling, you're starting to get it. There you go. I think for certain Hosea has our attention. And that's one thing I've noticed from the prophets. They're not all talk. They put to action their preaching. Israel, you cannot continue to walk down the path of unfaithfulness and expect no consequences. Israel, you are God's chosen people. Israel, you are supposed to be an example of God in this world, and God wants what God wants here today. Is there a warning here for us? You better believe it. Are we to all talk and no action? Is it easier for us to stand here in public? Oh, you go ahead and advance that on to the... You might need to just kind of close out and go back to PowerPoint again. Is it easier for us to stand here in public and say we are against injustice, and then back off when we're actually confronted with it? Several years ago, our bishop of the Nebraska area was a man by the name of Rhymes Moncure. He actually ordained me. Bishop Rhymes Moncure is African American, and a few years back, Cora and I had the opportunity to attend his welcome celebration. I'm probably assuming that Lauren and Shirley were probably at that welcome celebration as well. And I remember we were kind of sitting there, and there was this long table, and there was a bowl of peanuts there, and Cora wanted some peanuts, and so I went going after those peanuts. And there was an elderly woman behind me, a good United Methodist. I didn't know who she was, but she was there for the celebration. She looked in that bowl and she said, "How come they don't have any N-toes?" Now, she actually used the N word. She didn't say N. She used the actual N word. And you know what I said to that elderly woman? Do you know how I responded? I said absolutely nothing. Maybe I was in shock. Maybe I couldn't believe what she said. Maybe I'm thinking, I have a 4-year-old child with me, and you just used the N-word. And folks, I'm not being PC here. It is not being politically correct to use the N-word when dealing with a celebration for an African-American bishop or any time, because it is highly offensive. My friends, that happened 12 years ago. And I thought of that memory with the events that happened last week. Let me digress here just a bit. Last April, our church, our denomination, apologized for the Sand Creek Massacre. 1864. 700 men, led by John Chivington, attacked a group of unarmed Native Americans near the Sand Creek there in Colorado. It was a bloody massacre. History books are now coming up and talking about how these Native Americans were completely unarmed, and the only reason they were killed is because of who they were. They were just different. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, that's great the United Methodist Church is apologizing, but why are we apologizing for this specific massacre? John Chivington was a Methodist preacher in Denver. Sure, he was acting on behalf of the military, but every Sunday he sat there in the pulpit and he talked about God's love. Fast forward to this year. The United Methodist Church officially apologized for that action. It was a beautiful ceremony, and wonderful words were spoken. Are you able to advance it to the next slide there? What's that? Yeah, it's not going. Well, then last week, church gathered to elect 3 bishops in Wichita, Kansas. Quickly, they elected a bishop by the name of Reuben Sayens. Now, I'm excited to say that Bishop Sayens is going to be serving as our bishop, and I am so excited about his leadership in the church. As I said, they were to elect 3 bishops. 2 more to go. The second person that came up second in the balloting was a man by the name of Mark David Wilson. He runs the church, what is known as the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference. Long story short, hold on, let me back up. If he gets elected, he will be the first Native American bishop to be elected in the church. Long story short, he is not elected. Number 2 guy goes to a guy from Texas. Number 3 is to a guy from Missouri. Mark David Wilson comes in second every single ballot. Last Friday, we were up at camp, and we wanted to know how to pronounce Bishop Sayens' name. So I called up a good friend of mine, Eduardo. Eduardo grew up speaking Spanish. And I said, how do you pronounce his name? His name is spelled S-A-E-N-Z. And he said it kind of sounds like signs, but you actually pronounce both vowels. And so it's like Sayens. It's real quickly there in the Spanish dialect. Eduardo was there for the voting and was representing us. And so he talked about how these elections were going on with Mark David Wilson. And he noticed that Mark David Wilson kept coming in second. And one of Eduardo's colleagues came up to him and says, we already elected an Hispanic. And Eduardo's response was, I didn't know that we had a quota system here. And then later on, someone else said to him, where are we going to put him? I'm sure the same thing was spoken to the first woman, to the first African-American bishop that was elected. I am the first to admit that the church is not perfect. In fact, that is one of the reasons why I went on leave of absence for 3 years to work in the secular world. But one of the things I found in banking and in finance is the same thing took place. And I literally thought it would be better. And when God was tugging at my heart, telling me I need to get back in the professional ministry, I explained to our current bishop, Bishop Jones, about my experiences. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He says, yes, it is no different, but the church should do a better job. A prophet names children as a warning. He marries a prostitute to get people's attention, but he provides one nugget. Just listen to verse 10. Yet the number of the people of Israel shall be like the sand of the sea, which can be neither measured nor numbered. And the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, it shall be said to them, children of the living God. Hosea gave the people a terrible warning. And I might add, he sacrificed his family right along with it. But Hosea didn't leave. He didn't walk out of God's people. In fact, he stayed just where God said he needed to be and spoke a word of hope. These are tough times, God says. But hope will return. God will welcome us home again. And in the meantime, we need to pull up our sleeves and get to work, because we are a work in progress. In 1916, Georgia Tech played Cumberland College in football. Cumberland was this tiny little school, law school, out of Alabama. In fact, the game ended up, the final score was 222-0. Tech was this mighty football powerhouse. Towards the end of the game, quarterback Ed Edwards had fumbled the snap from the quarterback, and as these Georgia Tech linemen were charging in, Edwards yelled to his backs, "Pick it up! Pick it up!" And Edwards, his fullback, after seeing these monsters rush in, knowing that they were beating him up all day, turned to his quarterback and said, "You dropped it, you pick it up yourself." My friends, the church is the greatest thing ever created. I have seen the church come together in times of disaster, and need, in moments of grief and great joy. I have witnessed the church come together to raise incredible amounts of money for mission. Welcome in a family that is running away from war, and do all it can to lead in a wonderful children's ministry. And when God said, "Seth, it was time for you to come back," I came back to the church. We have dropped the ball in the past, but it's our turn to pick it up and make it better. We are the church together. Amen.